in a second. I want to show you something one more time here about Howie and the influence he has on these coaching hires. So the Eagles were number 2 in total defense this last year. You bring in Vance Joseph. Do you have 34 personnel? How do you know your linebackers have to be exceptional cover guys in a 34? They struggled this year covering tight ends and backs out of the backfield. You got linebackers on that team right now that can cover running backs and tight ends. If you play a 34, why would you change your whole entire scheme where you were number 2? Vance Joseph runs a 34. That's who he is. He's always run a 34. And that's predominantly a 5 front or a 40 front. I'm not saying the Eagles couldn't adapt to being a 34 with all the free agents. And the reason we are bringing John McMullen on is because there is a ton of question marks on the football team, and I want to get John's thoughts here. And we're going to play a little game of in and out. John, I appreciate you coming aboard here with us. And I first want to get your thoughts on the Super Bowl and your just takeaway from what you saw at the Super Bowl, you being there and all. Just your takeaway.
Missed opportunity. I mean, I thought the Eagles had control of the game at halftime. They did. They dominated the first half of football. I think that gets lost in obviously the final result. And they fell apart in the second half. And, you know, there's a lot of excuses, but bad field. Everybody played on the same field. Kansas City played on the same field, so I'm not buying that. James Bradbury at the end of the game. Look, he admitted it was a holding. So as far as that controversy goes, that's over. I mean, once the player admits it was holding and he wishes he got away with it, but he didn't. I have no problem with that. And the defense, you know, did not perform well. 4 possessions, would have been 4 touchdowns had not Jerick McKinnon be a savvy player and kneel down to essentially seal the game with a chip shot field goal. But I think the Eagles, and I think you saw Howie Roseman yesterday, was, you know, I don't want to say depressed, but use whatever term you want to use. He looked, you know, the loss hit him hard because he knew they were the better team. They were the more well-rounded team. They had him where they wanted him, and they let him off the canvas, so to speak. And Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid got the big right cross and knocked them out.
You know, John, in the second half, tell me if this is what you saw. Man, and I heard Bieniemy and I heard Andy talking, and I even heard Jason Kelce say this, that they started running a lot of crossing routes. And they really confused the secondary of the Eagles because they were trying to pass wideouts off back there. And guys were just wide open, John. I mean, some of them just passing it off. It just seemed to me, and you tell me if you agree here, that may have been the best coaching in the second half of that Super Bowl in Andy Reid's career. Yeah, that's as good as I've ever seen him with clock management, which was always a thing in Philly with him. His situational play calling, they had to score. Like you said, they could have scored on every possession. Shit, they still would be scoring if the clock didn't run out. I mean, do you agree, John? That was just masterful.
Well, you know, first of all, Andy Reid's a great coach. So he's always a great coach. I think the people that sort of went down that route with Andy Reid were wrong to begin with. I said it leading up to the Super Bowl. You know, one thing with the extra week is Andy Reid's going to have his team prepared. So none of that is any kind of surprise. You're talking about a first ballot Hall of Fame coach. So, I expect him to be on his P's and Q's basically at all times. I do think it's funny because in Philadelphia, and I hear it all the time, you know, a lot of Eagles fans don't like Jonathan Gannon, and you hear this buzzword, adjustments. You got to adjust. You got to adjust. I think it's funny. People just throw that word out there. They don't say, what do you mean? Tell me what you want to adjust. They were dominating the football game in the first half. So people say, well, you got to go into halftime and adjust. Not the Eagles. They were dominating. What are you adjusting from? They should have been up 24-7 if it wasn't for the uncharacteristic Jalen Hurts fumble. So, you can throw that in the toilet, that criticism, because that makes no sense. What are they adjusting to? But then you do have to, as Jim Sports would tell me, there's no such thing as halftime adjustments because you're adjusting after the first drive. You know that from playing. You got to constantly adjust. So that's number two. But here's the thing where I criticize Jonathan Gannon. He was unconventional. He played more man coverage than he has all season. Why? Why are you changing in the Super Bowl? He blitzed more than he typically does. Wasn't his biggest blitz game, but it was, I believe, top 3. He blitzed more than he normally does. The Eagles got bitten on that 0 blitz down near the goal line. And then you talk about, so you go through 19 games and you play one way, and all of a sudden you get to the biggest game of the all, and you play the biggest game of them all, and you play a different way. I would go, NFL Films put out, for all these out scheme people, NFL Films put out the Sky Moore touchdown when guys are mic'd up. Kansas City didn't even run the play they were supposed to run. It was a cluster, you know what? It was Keystone Cops. They didn't line up right. Patrick Mahomes was able to recover and get Sky Moore coming in motion. Wasn't even the play they were supposed to run. So I think all these narratives sort of get blown out of proportion. Back when the Eagles beat the Chicago Bears in the playoffs, the double doink game, Golden Tate scored a big touchdown. For people that remember that, didn't even run the right route. Didn't know the play, didn't run the right route, ended up well. That's what happened with Kansas City. So I partially agree. Andy Reid's a great coach. He's a great coach yesterday, today, tomorrow. The problem with Andy Reid is people criticize Andy Reid. They don't know what they're talking about. He might be a Mount Rushmore coach. He might be top 4 all time. He's certainly top 10. And then you can sort of argue from there. But Andy's always a good coach.
22 postseason wins now with that Super Bowl. Only Belichick is ahead of him in postseason wins now. So, John, elevating from within, are the Eagles just doing their due diligence? Are they really looking at potential outside guys? Or is it Denard Wilson and Brian Johnson, the front runners, to be the both coordinators?
Well, Brian Johnson's going to be the offensive coordinator. That's basically a fait accompli. Now you have to go through the Rooney Rule. You have to bring in people from outside the organization, at least one. So you can't just, for the people saying, why don't you just promote them? You can't do that. You got to go through the NFL rules. But I think defensively it's more open-ended. I think Denard will have a chance. Sean Desai is a guy they're going to request to talk to. He makes a lot of sense because he's a big Fangio student. I heard you mention a little bit about Vance Joseph. That's a big name people are going to recognize. But, yeah, I don't think he's a fit. Remember, the Eagles brought in Jordan Davis, who didn't play that much, but you don't want to ship. You drafted him for a reason because you're playing the scheme. Hassan Reddick had a phenomenal year, didn't have a great Super Bowl, but he had a great year. You really want to take him out of this scheme. And the larger picture is, number 2 defense, number 1 pass defense. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you struggled against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I think when the emotion kind of tempers down a little bit, people will realize this was a pretty stinking good defense. I mean, this is the modern NFL. I always say, back when you were playing, Dan, good defense could beat good offense, and usually did. Now it's the exact opposite. Good offense.
Now you're just trying to contain people, John.
Yeah. Good offense beats good defense, and they ran into a very good offense.
John, the only thing I'll say about that defense, that it's been a 2-year issue. that it's the run defense is still, I mean, they got a couple band-aids with Sue and Joseph. And when they got into it, I mean, and you got to think about it too. 8 quarters, John, the Chiefs ran the ball against the Eagles. Think about it. They ran the ball in 2 games against them for 360 yards. That's not what Andy Reid really does. And I
No, he
mean,
doesn't.
they
Yeah,
basically
here's the dirty little secret with this scheme. They don't care about the run.
they don't.
They're fine giving up 6, 7 yards. Now, here's the problem. That the whole goal of that defense is to limit explosive plays. And now,
The plus
and I've been
25 plays.
yeah, and I've been telling people all week if I told Eagles fans before the game Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for 182 yards, his longest pass play is going to be 22 yards, they would have been head over heels. They would have said, "Give it to me. We're going to win by 2 touchdowns." But that's not the way Kansas City played this year. This is not the Kansas City
Right.
of Tyreek Hill when they were killing people down the field. They shifted their offense, and they played that way all season. They played the meticulous route going down the field. So they were comfortable doing that. And I think that's what Jonathan Gannon didn't recognize. He didn't have to worry about the explosive plays as much as he normally does because that's not how Kansas City plays. And I think he should have tightened up the run defense a little bit. But the overall philosophy, and again, it goes back to Vic Fangio, they don't care about the run.
No, you're John, it's a great observation by you. But here's the only thing that I'll throw in on that. But when you play an elite guy like Mahomes and Reid's the play caller, and you're consistently in 3rd and short, your entire playbook's open up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's why the middle of that zone was open up. And that's why he was 90% completion percentage in the second half.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of what you're banking on. You're banking on, oh, you got to go 15 plays and you're going to make a mistake at some point. And they didn't make a mistake in the second half. They did in the first half. They didn't in the second half. You're banking on it might be a false start. It might be a holding call. It might be, what they really would have wanted, is a turnover. And to me, the difference between Super Bowl 52 and Super Bowl 57, because remember in Super Bowl 52, the Eagles gave up 500 yards passing. The difference was the defense made one play.
Right.
Brandon Graham strip sack.
They
make one play and they win the Super Bowl, but they didn't make one play. So, people can crap on JG all they want. The personnel did not play well.
Tell you
Hassan
what,
Reddick did not play well. Slay did not play well. Bradbury did not play well. Hargrave did not play well. Gardner Johnson did not play well. These are the Eagles' best players. These are Pro Bowl level players. Every single one of them didn't play up to their standard. Every single one of them. When that happens, you're in trouble. That's what happened.
John, I'm going to throw some names at you here. And real quick here, I put a priority list together. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the priority for the Eagles to re-sign him?
8. Pretty high.
It's going to be around 12, John.
I think it might be higher.
Me too. He's making $837 this year. He's going to be one of the most significant pay increase guys because of the base that he's making.
And that's the problem. How high do you want to go? I personally, what are the odds? This is another problem. So many players on that defense had career seasons, Chauncey being one of them. Can you really expect what he did when he was healthy this season moving forward? I think you got to be very careful with that. But, you have to trust your evaluation. He's obviously a good player. He's obviously a playmaker. The question is, he's going to be asking to be the highest paid safety in the NFL. Does he belong in that range? I don't think so. But how high do you go?
I completely agree. Javon Hargrave, Johnny's at 12-9 now. They put a 3-year, $51 million deal on the table a couple weeks ago. That's kind of in the ballpark. It's probably going to be 53. If he gets on the open market, he's probably going to be around 15 million. Do you pay that, John?
I will say, if you listen to Howie in his press conference yesterday, he was talking about the draft, and he said, the draft is more than a year process for Howie Roseman. He said 2024, we're going to have comp picks. And what that means is we're going to lose free agents this year. He knows he's going to lose free agents. Hargrave might be the toughest decision of all because he's a great pass rusher and he's a bad run defender. And people pay for pass rushers. And that means you got to pay a significant chunk of change for a guy who's going to be 30. And you just talked about the issues defending the run. That is a very, very tough decision. Problem is, Fletcher Cox is also aging out. They're not going to want to pay him. Brandon Graham's on the same defensive line. He's aging out. You're not going to want to pay him significant money. So you almost have to bring Javon Hargrave back. But you want that as short term as possible. You'd prefer 2 years, at the most 3 years.
James Bradbury, 29.5 years of age. Do you let him walk?
Yeah, I think if you ask me, the two most likely to walk is James and Miles Sanders for different reasons. James is going to get paid because he had a great season. Unfortunately, it didn't end in the way he would like. But he's had an all-pro season, was second-team all-pro, one of the best cornerbacks in football. It's his last chance probably to cash in with big money. Eagles just aren't going to be able to afford him.
Isaac Seumalo, John, here, I don't think he played relatively well in the Super Bowl. I thought that Chris Jones handled him pretty well, and they did a great job, really doing a great job against the run. However, I thought he played well the last 7 weeks of the season. They destroyed the DTs for the 49ers. He's going to command, John. He's probably around 5.5 now, and he's probably going to command $13 million. He comes out of the Eagle organization, known for a great old lineman. Man, I think 20 teams could have him start on their teams in this league.
At least. I'd tick up a bit there.
Yeah.
He's a very good.
I was being generous, John, maybe 30.
Yeah, he's a very good player. I think Isaac is tied to Jason Kelce. If Jason retires, I think the Eagles can afford to bring Isaac back. If Jason's playing, they probably can't afford him. They're going to lose him. Remember, they have Cam Jurgens, second-round pick from last year, ready to go.
You think they could move him over to right guard?
Yeah. I think he's going to be a starting player next year. The only question is it center replacing Kelce, retiring, or is it right guard replacing Isaac in free agency? Because if Kelce retires, they can bring him back. If Kelce doesn't, you can't pay Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelce. You can't pay everybody that money.
Look, John, 16 for Mailata, 18 for Lane, 10 for the center. That means you'd have to pay 14 or 13 to Isaac Seumalo. I mean, Jesus criminy. You're talking about they may be the best line that I've seen since the Cowboy line, but you're talking about the most expensive. Hey, 2 last questions here for you. TJ Edwards, Kaiser White, are both back? Are one back? Are both gone?
One's back. Same thing with sort of Cam Jurgens. Nakobe Dean is waiting to take over one of those spots.
John, are you sure about that with him?
No, I'm not. I have more confidence in Cam being ready to play than Nakobe Dean, but I'm just telling you from the Eagles' thought process. They want to keep TJ. The question is, it's a devalued position. How high are people going to go for TJ Edwards? The market will determine that. If he gets too much money, the Eagles will bow out, and they'll probably try to re-sign Kaiser White and team him with Nakobe Dean, but they prefer to have TJ back and team him with Nakobe Dean. So kind of depends on the market. I've seen some. I know Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus put a really big number on TJ. If that's out there, it's going to be difficult to keep him.
7 million, wasn't it something like that?
It was over 10. It was
Yeah,
10,
because
11.
the tag is 20 at the position. And I said this, he makes I think it's 1.3 right now. I mean, John, you're talking a $9 million if he gets on the open market.
Yeah, and remember, that's a position.
I'm not going to give a haircut to Philly that much.
Yeah. No, this silliness about team-friendly deals. Look, that's for, the Tom Brady types who've made their money. When you're Jalen Hurts and you're going on your second contract, you're not given any team discounts. That's your opportunity to make big money for the first time.
I said
TJ Edwards, same thing.
Said this to people, like
contract.
John, I said this to people. I went like this. I go, dude, hometown discounts, they gave that to you this year. Jalen's 1.4. CJ's $800,000. Your hometown deal was this year, not next year. The players aren't going to do that because they feel they gave it to you. Last one, John. Marcus Epps. What do they do there with him?
Same thing, linebacker. You're probably keeping one. If you get priced out of CJ, well, then you got to keep Marcus and team him up with maybe Reid Blankenship, who was a big surprise. If they get CJ back, which is what they want, then they'll probably let Marcus walk. Comp picks. That's what Howie said. We're going to have comp picks, and what that means is we're going to lose free agents. So, they want to keep CJ. If they can't keep CJ, and timing plays into it as well. Like the good thing about Kelsey's going to let the Eagles know to plan, if he's coming back or not. So they'll have an indication, and they'll know. All right, we can try to bring Isaac back. With linebacker and safety, you're at the mercy of the market unless you get things done before free agency starts. And Howie will be trying to do that with TJ Edwards and CJ Gardner-Johnson. Because remember, that's the type of player the Eagles want to target. Guys coming off their rookie deals, going into their second contracts. They're young. They're ascending in theory. Although it's hard to imagine either of them, they both had career years. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They had so many players on defense that had career years. To expect them to come back next year and play at that level, it usually doesn't happen. That's why we call career years, because they're career years.
No, John, same thing with Miles Sanders. Everyone's like, oh, Miles is a Pro Bowler. I'm like, that guy's not done anything close to what he did this year. And there's nobody out there going to pay $8 million for Miles Sanders.
Well, that might help. If the market's not there, and, remember, Josh Jacobs is out there. Dalvin Cook's probably going to get cut. There's going to be a lot of better running backs on the market, and that might help the Eagles bring Miles Sanders back. I don't even know if the Eagles want to bring Miles Sanders back, to be honest.
He was one of the easiest disappointments in the Super Bowl. John, I want to sneak one last one. This is about Howie and drafting. I said this, you know what? I went back and looked. In the time that he was the general manager of the team, from 2010 to 14 and then 19 to 23 currently right now, can you name me a cornerback that he's drafted in the 20 years he's been involved with personnel where you went, man, that was a great corner? He's great at making free agent deals. I mean, he got TJ Edwards like a non-drafted free agent. They had to go get Kaiser White. They cut Josh Sweat, I think, is developing, John, into a every down player, and I like the player. I like him a lot, actually. I didn't at first, but I do now. And you get Hassan Reddick because you kind of couldn't find an edge rusher. I mean, you really feel he's a good talent evaluator when it comes to drafting? I think he's better in free agency, John.
I think everybody has hits and misses in the draft. I mean, you go back to the Dallas Goedert, Devonta Maddox, Josh Sweat, Jordan Mailata draft. That's pretty stinking good.
No. I get it. I'm talking defense, not the offensive guys.
Yeah. So, there's more and how he calls it talent gathering season. There's more than one way to acquire players. And like sometimes things work out, right? You think about last year with AJ Brown. Eagles couldn't get Calvin Ridley. They tried to trade for him.
Luckily,
they wanted to sign Calvin Kirk, got priced out of it. Jacksonville overpaid him. They wanted to sign Allen Robinson, but he wanted to go play for the Super Bowl champions. Nice decision, Allen. And they were forced, and they were forced to trade for AJ Brown. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. When it comes to draft choices, look, everybody's going to point to Jalen Reagor. If the Eagles didn't take Jalen Reagor, Green Bay or New Orleans was going to take Jalen Reagor. I think there's this nonsense of, the Eagles, nobody else was going to take Jalen Reagor. Everybody in this league was enamored with Jalen Reagor and thought he was a first round pick, or at the worst case scenario, bridge pick. New Orleans, I was told, was going to take him. Justin Jefferson got taken. I believe the number was 22. Well, there's 20 other teams with chances, 20 other choices that could have taken Justin Jefferson. And guess what? You go back to that draft, they all said he was a slot receiver. Oh, he's just a slot receiver. People pick out individual picks, and then they go, oh, Jordan Mailata, well, you got lucky. Well, they did get lucky, but part of that is player development as well. And that doesn't count.
Sweat doesn't developing count. Him into what he is right now. And John, to your point, I went back and looked at all the boards, and I looked back at all the people, what they said about the second round pick a couple of years ago named Jalen Hurts, and everyone on the planet hated the pick, John. 97% of the people in Philadelphia hated the pick.
That's not true.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, so John, to your point about Jalen Reagor, hey, you may have missed on that, but you guys also hated the Jalen Hurts pick. And now all of a sudden everybody wants to revise history and go, no, man, I remember him. I loved him. You're like, no, you didn't.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's how I judge Howie's job. They had the best roster in the NFL.
They did.
So he's a pretty good GM.
I'll tell you, the hirings, John, think about the hirings and the assistants. Look at this now. So you got a coach in Arizona. Frank Reich is a coach in Carolina. You got a coach in Indianapolis now. You got a general manager in Cleveland. You got a general manager in New York with the Jets. The front office of the Eagles not only lands on the right coaches, but the personnel people too. I got to tell you, Jeffrey Lurie, the more I follow the team, John, he's got to be one of the top 5 owners in the National Football League on landing on the right people. Even Chip Kelly had a winning record, and look what he's doing at UCLA. He's turning that thing around. He was the lesser of all those guys.
They also have an assistant GM in New York, and Brandon Brown, assistant GM in Chicago, who almost got a GM job this time around. So those guys are on their way. When people look for stuff, they go to the Eagles because they know it's a well-run organization. You already have Kevin Patullo's got an offensive coordinator job, interviews, excuse me. Brian Johnson, the reason they're going to elevate him is because if they don't elevate him, they're going to lose him to offensive coordinator. Denard Wilson's already gotten interviews in Cleveland, and there was another interview that he got. All of a sudden, people woke up one day for years. it was Sean McVay, right? If you ever got a cup of coffee with Sean McVay, you can get an interview in this league. Now it's Nick Sirianni. 2 years later, 10% of the league has ex-Eagles being a head coach. 2 years. Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, and people can say what they want. Really sharp guys. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Hey, John, how come no interest in Eric Bieniemy?
He's
an Andy Reid guy. I mean, like Doug Peterson was an Andy Reid
guy. Typically there's stuff dating back to Colorado with Eric.
That's what hey, John, you're the only person that has said that and is not afraid to say that. It's his background and it's Reid as the play caller. I mean, it's plain and simple. It's his background. All those arrests, pushing people around. I mean, the fireman situation. I mean, that stuff is all going to get brought up if he puts the main headset on.
Unfortunately, I mean, from a standpoint of being a coach, if you didn't have some of the other issues, yeah, he's probably deserving. And typically, we know it's almost a coronation. If you're an offensive coordinator for Andy, eventually you're going to get a head coaching job. Matt Nagy's going to be the offensive coordinator again, and he's going to get a head coaching job. He's going to get a second opportunity. Mike Kapka almost got the Arizona job. He's going to be a head coach soon. Andy's tree is without peer. And I get why people say it, but they don't know the history, and they just take the low-hanging fruit. And there's more to it. Yeah, there's more to it.
Is it the Andy Reid tree, though, John, or is it the Holmgren tree?
Well, you can get, I mean, you can, if you want to go back and give, Mike credit for Andy. Yeah, go back. Yeah. If you want to go back far enough. But it is Andy's. If you go back to 99, his first year with the Eagles, take some time out to Wikipedia that coaching staff. It's freaking unbelievable. How many?
That's one of the best around that he put together, and Joe Banner and him. Hey, John, thank you for spending so much time, man. A lot of fun, man. I mean, I got a lot of answers here on some of these players here, especially I know that you're around the team all the time. You did a great job covering the team all year long, especially on the post-game show as well and the pregame show. Thank you so much for taking time with us, John.
Thanks, Dan.
You got it. Great John McMullen from Birds 365 in the morning. Make sure you can check those guys out. They do a spectacular job each and every single morning. I thank you guys for coming aboard. Do me a favor. Please hit the like button. Hour number 2, keep it here on